Hello there. Day 6 of our garage modding for IMVU. 6 days. So we've been working on this garage room for, let's say garage just one more time. Garage. We've been working on this room for a couple of days, and this is what we ended up with as a basic room that was exported. IMVU exported as an FBX file and imported and assembled in IMVU. So that's what we ended up with. And it's pretty decent from the point of view of it being a room. But one of the challenges with making rooms is that they can look a bit blank, a bit empty. That's notwithstanding the poses, but they can look a bit empty, and they present the problem for the user in that the items that they drop into the room may not necessarily fit the room. So if someone were to drop carpentry tools in here, so you're talking ladders, sawhorses, and other bits and pieces to do with the construction of this particular room, it wouldn't necessarily fit. So what we can do is add those details to the room, and we can do them in a way that will allow for those particular features to be added, well, left in place and or removed should the driver wish for that to be the case. So let me just double check something. So what we can do without using too many assets, or without creating too big a file, is add some elements to the room meshing them in place, which we can then also perhaps use as the basis for furniture. Or not furniture, poses. So let's minimize that. So this is what we had, and as the additions would take a bit of time, I've been working offline sneakily, very sneaky. And this is what we could add, number 14. So let's just hide the poses and all the room stuff. Skeleton, furniture nodes. We don't need the helpers. Well, no, let's leave the helpers in place. So this is what we ended up with. So we've added lots of just little features to the room to make it a bit more interesting, and add points of focus that we might be able to add some poses to. For example, this pile of plywood sheets or OSB boards, what we could do is use this and have the avatar looking around the corner to see if there's something in this gap, in this dark corner, like they were looking for a rat or something. But without these here, let's just hide those. Without those there, it's just a pretty plain wall. So undo that. But with those in place, we've now got a point of interest that we can utilize to make some poses. And it's the same with all the other bits and pieces that are around the room. So we haven't necessarily taken up too much space, floor space. Everything is around the periphery of the room, so we've still got a large enough area for people to put their own furniture items if they wanted to. But we've just added some interest elements. So we've got a corner of insulated wall panels, so we could have a pose holding up the wall panel, holding this up. Or placing this one into the corner, which is going to go there eventually. So that's what we can do in terms of adding little features, elements that make the room interesting and allows us to, oh, and there's door handles as well, so we've added some door handles on the doors, so there's another point of interest where we can get a pose, because otherwise, let's just open another instance of Blender. Number 11. Otherwise the room is it's decent enough in terms of it just being a basic furniture room, but there's no points of interest necessarily other than maybe the boxes and the windows and doing a pose next to the door, but a generic pose because there's nothing for the avatar to do. So with just some simple changes, even doing things like an image, editing the image that's assigned to the door, which one are we on? So remove, where's the door? Garage doors. There we go. So remove muddy shoes before entering the house or else. And then what, mom? Question mark, question mark. So we can do things like that as well. So we can use the textures to add interest. So again, there's a point of focus that we can have a pose looking at the sign or reading the sign or holding something up as if to say that they're the ones that are writing on the wall, writing on the notice that's stuck to the door. But this doesn't interfere with the main space of the room. Just put that to one side. This doesn't interfere with the space of the room because these are all elements that are placed around the sides, but they add interest. So one of the things that was also changed is the windows. A flat plane looks okay, but what we can do is use the flat plane and create an actual window with a bit of 3D depth. And to create one of those is relatively simple. Let's use, so we've got a flat surface here. Just going to grab that, Shift D, and separate it. We're going to make a wonky window. Whoops, wrong thing. There we go. So it doesn't matter that this is wonky. To make a window, let's just set the origin to the geometry to make this easier. Let's move that to one side so we can see the original window. and what we're going to use to make a new window. So edit mode, split this in half. So we want a loop cut, whoops, wrong one, loop cut, one down the center, top to bottom, and one left to right. And then with the inset tool, we can select a face and inset, and there we have a very simple window framework. And then to get the panes of window, the panes of glass, select those windows, those faces, and just extrude them backwards. And there is your window framework. And of course, based on the texturing that we've got assigned to this, so let's remove all the redundant. So we don't need that, don't need that. So we have to be in object mode to remove materials. We want windows. We don't want that. Get rid of that, get rid of that, and that. So what we have left is frames, that's the green color, and the window panes, which are the transparent areas. So we can go into UV mapping mode, and we can use, so we've still got those window panes selected, we can use our opacity map. Where's that gone? We can use this as our template to guide. So we need to assign that material to those selected frames. So we have to select it and assign, click assign, and there is our transparent windows. But just grab those. Whoops. We need to change that to median point. And then we can just move these vertexes into place. And we have our window panes. And as we discussed yesterday, because this is using there is our window pane, so we can see through that now. And as we discussed yesterday, this particular material with the window itself will be visible. Well, it'll be interpreted or assembled in IMVU automatically. So it brings in the opacity map as well as obviously the diffuse. And that's because of the way that we've got this material set up with the transparency. So in shading, so it's got our diffuse, which is just basically a grey texture, and then we've got our mask, and that's connected directly to the alpha channel of the BSDF, the principal BSDF, and that just automatically brings everything, that will automatically be brought in to IMVU, so we don't have to fiddle with that. But that's how you make a simple window. So from a flat plane, depending on how many window panes you have, you can subdivide it once, inset, so subdivide, then inset, so you end up with that, and and then extrude backwards, so you end up with your 3D windows. So that's how you can make a window frame from a flat plane. Whoops. You'll also need to remap the framework. So using our materials, we can deselect the windows, select the framework, UV editor, switch texture, so we want garage frames. What we want to do here is similar to what we've been doing with the framework generally. That's orientate. So let's just scale these up. Invert the selection. View, invert, deselect the windows. Scale those up. Individual origins. Rotate. And we can select everything and just double check. So what we're doing is aligning the texture or the grain of the wood to the structure of the wood. Otherwise you end up with a cross section. But that's a simple window which you can then adjust as you need to. So if you want the outer border, if you want that thicker, it's just a question of selecting those inside faces and using the scale widget, so either the scale widget itself or the scale handles. And just scale them inwards. Very simple edit. And there we have slightly thicker wood frame. So for door handles, so that's how you make a simple wooden framed window. Door handles, they're pretty simple depending on what it is that you are, the style of door handle that you are trying to replicate. I'm going to try and keep it, just drink some water. You want to try and keep them simple because these are relatively small details. So they're not going to occupy a huge amount of presence on screen. Focus on that. So they're very low resolution. Very low resolution because they don't need to be any more, they don't need to be any higher resolution than that, because they are such small objects within the broader scene that you're not necessarily going to notice that they are low resolution. But a quick way of making handles, so let's just get the cursor to snap. So Shift S, we want cursor to selected. What I'm going to do is just add a cube, mesh cube. So there's a cube. I'm going to make a door handle from this, very simple one. It's going to be it'll be large for the moment so that we can focus on it, but what we're going to do is just toggle into edit mode, We're mostly going to be in face select for this, but we're going to toggle between all of them depending on what it is that we need to do. So let's make the I'm not sure what this bit is called actually. Don't need that back face, so we can get rid of that. Delete or X. Grab the front face, duplicate it, Shift D or mesh, duplicate, reset, and then what we want to do with this is just rescale it so that it's square. It doesn't have to be exactly square, but approximately square. Then we can rotate this 45 degrees, so hold Control down, or what you can do is press the R key to activate rotate and then type 45 and it'll rotate 45 degrees. But what you might want to do as well is press the R key and it'll be the X key, I think. Yes, X key to lock the axis and then 45. Shrink that down. Just reposition, extrude. Shrink. So this is the arm of the door handle. We don't need this front face. Get rid of that. We don't need the back face. It's probably created as well. Get rid of that. Grab that front face again. Duplicate again. And what we can do with this, edge select. So I'm using the shortcut keys. So that's the number 1 for vertex, 2 for edges, 3 for faces. Grab that and grab the edges and create a very basic handle shape. Roughly position it. And then what you can do is split the two ends. So select them, edge, subdivide, grab that middle bit, pull that out. So you've now got something that's got a bit of depth. Close the ends. Whoops. So select those two, and then where is it? Vertex, new edges, faces, both ends. Vertex, grab, move that back, and there is a rather ginormous door handle. And then of course you could just play around with the proportions. And then just move that into position. So we're going to select. So we've got separate elements for this. So each part of this. So we've got a handle section, a spindle section, and the back plate, I guess those are called. So if we want to select a particular section, what we can do is just select an element of the section that we want to select and use Control Numpad plus, and we select all the elements, add some to the selection. So what we can do is just position that in place, and there is a very simple basic handle. Obviously shrink that down, Whoops. Plonk it into place. Obviously imagine that that one in the background is not there. And there is your door handle. It's a very large door handle. So that's how you create a door handle. Very simple one. Oh, we can also add shade smooth, which makes it go like that. And then what we can do is normals, auto smooth, or if we want more control, disable that. Modifiers, add modifier, and then we want edge split. And then we can increase the edge angle 45, 50. And what that does is it smooths some sections but not others based on the steepness of the angle between faces. So let's try 65. Nope. 75. Nope. 85. Nope. 90. Well, that gets everything, so we want to avoid that. So if you want greater control, disable edge angle, edit mode, select our edges that we want to be sharp, and then edge mark sharp. So we can selectively sharpen our edges to make some surfaces look like they're hard-edged. So that's a door handle. So again, that's pretty quick. Just use a box and you're pretty much there already, just starting from a box. But don't make them too detailed, because they are not going to be seen too clearly in a scene because they are so small. Same goes for the texturing as well. So let's get rid of that. So hide that, hide our window frame, which is that one. So same sort of principle with the texturing as well. So there are actually 3 door handles in this unit, and they are all UV mapped to one texture, because what that allows us to do is change the color relatively easily. So it's a 128 by 128 texture, so it's a relatively small texture, but it allows us to change the color of the individual door handles. So in the same way that we are using a 256 by 256 for the doors, and we have a we have a left and a right, so we have a square 256 by 256 essentially just split down the middle, and we have a door on one side and a door on the other, and that allows us to create a certain degree of uniqueness to our room without adding tons of image assets. And that's particularly useful because of the shape of a door. It's basically what is it? That'll be essentially 1 wide by 2 high. So 1 unit wide, 2 units high. So 1 by 2. And that fits well within a square. So if we can utilize as much much of our texture space that we've got available as much as possible, we're making the room optimized in terms of how quickly it will load. So we've done the same thing with the door handles, so we can see them actually a bit more easily on this texture. So we've got the 3 door handles mapped to one texture. It's a 128 by 128, so we can apply different color schemes to the different handles. And just that little feature adds a bit more interest, because it means that the door handles are not using exactly the same image, but just positioned differently. We can use actual different colors. So one of the other things as well, in terms of how that works, that principle of, so if IMVU essentially is limiting us to 256 by 256 squares, or 256 by 512, we have to work within that limitation in terms of what it is that we can do. So we can play around with our UV maps. So again, because the door handles are relatively small objects, we don't need to waste an entire 128 by 128, 256 by 256. We don't need to waste an entire texture on such a small feature, because you can't get close enough to it in IMVU to see any particular detail. So that allows us to add a number of these instances of the mesh on the same image, but we can change we can apply different areas, different colors to different areas of the image just to affect a particular door handle. So we can control, or we can allow the driver the ability to control the coloring of that particular element of the room quite easily, because it's just a simple color change. For bigger features, what we can do, so we've got these plywood panels in place, and at the moment they use exactly the same texture as the back walls, or basically the structure, the main structure of the room uses the same image. But if the deriver wants to get rid of these panels, they can't, because it's using the same image. So if they replace the image on the panels, it'll replace the image that's on the walls as well. And to avoid that, what we can do so this will be 10, 11. I've lost count of how many materials there are. I think this will be 11. So what we can do is, for the inner wall panels, what we can do is create a new material slot. So this is panels, and then our IMVU compliant numbers, 11. Go into shading. So that's the basic material blocks. So we just want to select a panel. need to that's right. So so there's our panel. That's the one that we created the new material for, because there are lots of separate objects in the scene, so the materials have to be assigned to all the individual objects that may contain duplicate materials. So the panel that we've just selected and just created a new material for is the only one that will have this new material assigned to it by default. So add texture, image texture, open, and we want a different material, texture rather, open, and if we drop that onto there, make sure that that material is assigned in edit mode, or what we can do is just deselect or delete all the other unwanted materials, and as you can see it's just toggling through them until we get to the one that we want, and it automatically assigns it, or well, it's assigning it to the object. So we can now do the same thing. Wall panels, now that we have that material established, to assign it to a new object, select the object. It doesn't matter how many materials are already existing, it'll show the one that actually is assigned, so make sure that's selected, and then we want to click on the Browse Material to be Linked button, and then Wall Panels, there it is, and it automatically updates. So make sure we've got the right material selected. So what that does, we'll do the other ones that are actually on the room in a second. What that does is it separates those sections of the mesh out from the main room. So when the object is in IMVU, we've got another material slot available that can be left in place or changed, or using an opacity map just removed so that the texture doesn't display. So that's a way of controlling the appearance of elements within your rooms. So let's assign that material to these sections. So select the face, Control plus, select everything. So in this instance we don't have a material slot available, so click the plus button to create an empty slot, assign that, it'll make the panel go blank, and then to that we assign the one we just created, so number 11, and there it assigns. The same thing on this one, but now that we have that created and assigned, it's now available to assign to this. So select it and then click assign. So that assigns that to that material, that mesh section. So we've got separate outside and separate inside surfaces. So what else was there? Interest-wise or feature-wise, again, we've got these ceiling sections or insulation sections, and rather than just making them squares, so rather than just doing this, so let's select a ceiling section, snap the cursor to that point, so that's Shift S to get the pie menu up, or if I can remember where they are. Where is... I can never remember where the... Where is it? Oh, there it is. Snap. That's one of the features that is seemingly in the wrong place, but Snap is Shift S. That gets the pie menu up. The menu, proper menu is Mesh. Whoops. It's Mesh, Snap, cursor to selected, and then what we can do is exit edit mode, drop in a box. So what we want to avoid doing really is something as simple as this. So that's an insulation panel, but it's pretty boring. So we need to get rid of that top face. It's pretty boring. And you might as well have not placed the ceiling sections in place. If you put something like this in place, then there's no need for ceiling. So if you're going to have a ceiling section, you might as well do something interesting to the insulation. So we can add a couple of loop cuts, offset them, or do something odd to them. Maybe rotate them randomly, and we can use our element selection, so edges, and anyone that is familiar with home decoration knows that insulation does not behave itself when it's left unattended. So doing something as simple as that so it's drooping quite heavily. So we can shade smooth that. We need to sort out our edges so we can use, might be able to use normals for this. Whoops. Increase the angle to 45. So that's now sharpened our 90-degree edges, but left our softer edges, well, our less severe edges smooth. And then we can UV unwrap that. Need to put a couple of edges. Because we want to unwrap this flat. Mark seam. So again, that's just a shortcut for the edge menu. Mark seam. Select all. UV editing. That's the default map that we've got. We want to redo that, so just press the U key. Oh, and we scaled this, so because we scaled it, we have to adjust object mode, object, apply, rotation and scale, and then we can do that, and it corrects the UV map. So we also want to make some adjustments. Because we want to try and avoid these clipping issues. Right, so that's the object. Assign the correct image, and then we have to assign a material to it. So material to be linked button. We're in material properties, obviously. And we want insulation, wherever that's gone. There it is, number 10. And because we've got backface culling enabled, you can see through it. So whenever you're adding something, whether it's a feature of interest or an interest feature, make sure that you've got the backface culled so you can see through it, which we haven't done to the wood. So let's select the wood panels, because we don't want those obscuring the view into the room. So that's the material all the way down to the bottom, and then backface culling, disable or enable. And then we can see through it. And it's the same for everything that's added to the walls. So if I select the so we want to be able to see into the room from the outside. Let's move this. Swizzle that around. Whoops. Grab. Let's move this into that left corner. Oh, it's just one face. Let's pull that corner down. So what we could do, let's save this, 15. So, oh, and there's the boxes as well. Cardboard boxes. I forgot about those. So, let's get a clear view of one of them. So we've got cardboard boxes that are open, and they've got those, what are they called, packing peanuts. So those are relatively straightforward to do as well. So let's grab this box at the back here, select a face, and then we're going to use the Control plus again to select everything. Just duplicate this so that we have a new box. Move that into the middle of the garage. So that is a simple cube. It's the cardboard box as we worked on yesterday, or day before, or losing count of track of time. So to open this, what you can do, use loop cut, place a loop cut across the where the tape is, obviously, because that's where the it's been taped shut. So just drop a loop cut there, just need the one. Select those two top faces, and we want vertex, is it vertex, edge or face? No, is it mesh? No, it's mesh. Keep moving things around. So select those two faces, mesh. What we want is split. And what this does, it'll detach those two faces from the box. So we can do that to them. We could go one step further, select one side, mesh, split. That splits those two apart. So we now have two faces. And rather than fiddling around with these individual faces, trying to rotate them into position, what you can do is switch to vertex select mode. And then what we want to do here is snap and merge these two vertexes together. So you select the one, you select the vertex that you want to snap and merge to first, and then everything else. So it's this second vertex. So this is going to be snapped and merged to that. Now where is this? Merge vertices, there it is. And then we want at first. There are a number of options depending on how you've actually selected the vertexes, but it's best just to go at first and make sure that the one that you want as your the one that you want left or remaining is the one that you select first. So mesh, where's it gone? Merge vertices, there it is, at first. This is the thing with Blender, once you get used to all the shortcuts, so Alt M is the shortcut for this, and once you have that in memory, Alt M, there's the merge menu. Once you've got that in memory, it's actually surprisingly difficult to remember where the actual menu options are for these things. Especially with Blender 2.8, because they are moved, so they're not always in the place that they used to be in Blender 2.79 or even previous versions all the way back to 3.9 or 4.9, 0.49. But anyway, so we can select those. I'm going to use a shortcut, and that creates our open box. Whoops. See, that's what happens when you select the order incorrectly. So undo. So that's our open box, and then we can just grab those vertexes and just open the box. And if we want, select that top edge using our vertexes or edge select, subdivide, so that's dropped a new vertex in that little corner in the middle. So what we can do with this is just make the box lid slightly wonky, because everybody knows that boxes suffer tremendous abuse. So that's an open box, and then for the stuff that's inside, select the bottom faces, duplicate, so Shift D or mesh duplicate, reset, so that's the escape key. Then move those new faces to the top, and what we can do with this is assign a new material to that selection. So we've got our faces selected, and there is our box packaging peanuts. Box peanuts. Unwrap, and there are our peanuts. And of course we can change the shape of these as well, so select those edges or a couple of edges, doesn't matter what, subdivide, vertex or even edge mode, and we can play around with the shape that we create so that we are not leaving a flat surface in place. So there is an open box. Let's make this a separate object. Control, Control, and then detach, mesh, separate, selected. So we have a box on its own. Reset the origin point, object, let's reset origin to geometry. So we can now put that somewhere where it's going to be a nuisance and in the way, like next to that. So again, what we could do here is we could use this to create a pose so that the avatar is maybe moving the box out of the way of the installation. And it thematically fits with the room. So again, we're trying not to put anything in the main area. So that's this, basically this space. So we're leaving that as free as possible, and we're just dropping things more or less in very sort of isolated areas that allow us to create some focal points that we can then design some poses around. And that's what we'll do in the next video. In the next stream we'll actually create some poses. Now that we've got some features, some areas of interest, now we can actually add some poses to the room that are actually going to make the room more interesting from an interactive point of view, and just interesting generally speaking. So rather than just doing, so let's just save this, save as 16. So rather than doing this, which is okay, there's nothing wrong with that, as we were saying earlier, trying to make poses for a room like this is much more difficult than creating poses for a room like this. And the thing is, or the main point is that the floor space isn't, let's go into, let's do this, here comes the science bit. So let's do this semi-scientifically. So that's the floor space that we've got between the two of them. So just flipping back and forth between the two. And we haven't really lost any floor space. But adding these little elements allows us to add more interest to the room. And it doesn't take that much to actually do. So it's worth thinking about the rooms that you create and making them more than just boxes, which you can do, obviously, but the problem with that people have is that the items that they then drop into the room won't necessarily fit. And for example, if they wanted to, I don't know if there actually is any insulation panels available in the catalogue, but let's say for the sake of argument they wanted to add insulation panels to the ceiling, they're not going to get something that'll fit, because obviously the insulation panels will be just made as panels, as objects in their own right, rather than something that's meant to fit somewhere. So if you can design that into your rooms, all the better. And of course, if you set them up in this particular way so that you do have a ceiling texture in place, it means that all of these objects can be hidden using material placement. Not material placement, using so that's the delete key on the numpad key. It's if you select something, depending on where the mouse cursor is, if you press that, it'll focus on it, which is frame selected. You can do that in the outliner. So if we select an object and we can't find it because there's tons and tons and tons of items listed in the outliner, what you can do is move the mouse over the outliner and press the numpad period key and it'll go straight to it. Whoops, that's the one we wanted. So we can allow derivers the ability to remove these elements by using opacity maps, so that they would, if they wanted to, get back to just a box room. So they could use opacity maps to hide the boxes, the insulation, and then the wall panels, because these are separate objects as well. Can't really do it on the joined mesh. But what we can do is let's just select those. Whoops, those panels. Select them all. So that's Control plus again. What we can do is separate same for the insulation. Select that. Just the P key. That's a shortcut. This is just so that we can do that, so that the deriver has the ability to revert the room back to just a very basic room. Where have our door handles gone? Oh, they're still there. So that's one of the things that you want to think about with your rooms, is you're not really just slapping as many textures as you can into the room. Think about your texture use, and think about it from the point of view of trying to get as much usage from them as you can. So again, we've got two doors assigned to the same image. garage doors. And you're adding feature interest by changing the color so they're not the same color, and or using your graphic skills, your elite skills, to add things like these notes, like this note to the door, to one of them, so that there is a feature interest. Right, so let's unhide all of that stuff. So that's Alt H. And then in the next stream, we will definitely, positively, with 100% certainty, create some poses. I might actually add, I know what we can do. Let's do a quickie. Just going to adjust these materials for a second, because the default shiny value, so specular, makes them quite difficult to discern. Box peanuts. Where did we put our box? There it is. It just flattens the lighting on them so that we don't get these reflective spots that we can that can be quite distracting. It just flat lights them. Oh look, we've got a box. Oh no, those are the old ones that we want to get rid of. So we don't want these. These are the old ones. So what we could do is add a ladder in this corner. Double check our materials. So drop a box, add mesh cube. So where's that gone? So we've just added something to the scene, we can't see it. So view, frame selected. Oh, so that's where it went. Grab that, move that over there. So what we're going to do with this is make a simple short ladder, but we're going to use the same sort of principle that we made, that we used for the window frame to make a ladder. And let's see if this works. So make it a little wider, a little bit taller. Someone wrote a song about that. A little taller. So that's our basic shape. So we only want this to be a simple ladder. Right, so what we want to do here is loop cut. So there's the tool, and we want to, oh, it doesn't show them. Why doesn't it show them? 3, 4, 5. Really need to see them. Don't like that at all. So going to exit out of that, press escape or right click depending on how you've got your, oh, it's not going to do it now. Okay, press the move tool. So let's use the shortcut key, which is Control R. So we can use the middle mouse to scroll up and subdivide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, that'll do. Click. Face select, inset, inset. They don't have to be exactly the same because this is an old ladder. It was given to the owner by their grandpa. So we can get rid of that top face, get rid of this back face, get rid of the bottom, delete all of that, delete these. Oh no, we can extrude these, so let's extrude these backwards. So select, extrude, whoops, try and do that in one move so that we're not creating extra, and then delete those faces, get rid of that one at the top, that one at the bottom, straighten those up. So the tools are always active until you click one of the manipulation widgets. Do the same at the bottom. And of course we have to make these shorter. Let's make this a bit thicker. So to do a loop select, it's Alt right click if you've got your, depending on how you've got your mouse set up, and Shift Alt right click to do a multiple select. And depending on how this is going to be placed in the scene, we might want to make sure that the back face is invisible, like we have with most of the other things that are essentially leaning against the wall, aside from the boxes obviously. So let's just give this a quick material, and this will be 12, so square brackets 12, so that's our IMVU compatible material. It's the number that's important. Shading, add texture, image texture, connect that to base color, and we don't have a material to hand an image, so we're going to create one. Ladder, and this can be 512 by 128. Whoops, no, so it's 128. Actually, we might even be able to get away with 64. Let's just try 128 first. Width 128, 512. Generated type, color grid, OK, and it assigns the image. Now we have to do our UV mapping. So select, unwrap, It's made a very wonky ladder. So where is our texture? There is our texture. Might go back after the go back at this offline and improve it, but that is a very basic ladder. So we can scale this a little bit so that we use up as much of the UV space as possible. Yeah, so I'll go over this and make a proper ladder that's befitting the room itself, but that's a quick way to make a ladder. Just create add a box, it could be a plane as well, subdivide it a number of times, inset, extrude, and then obviously in this instance, backface culling. So there's backface culling disabled, so we can see through the ladder so it doesn't impinge on our ability to see into the room. So that's a quick ladder, and again it's another feature item that's in a corner out of the way, that doesn't get in the way of the main footprint of the room, but we can add a pose to that, so we can now create a number of poses. So that's what we will do finally in the next stream. I'll do a bit more work on this offline because obviously editing actually takes quite a bit of time, and it's very repetitive, or it can be very repetitive. So I'll do that offline so we have some other objects that we can use for poses, and then we'll make a selection of poses for the room that are specific to the room, so that so it's a bit more interesting. So we'll call it quits there. Thanks for lurking lurkers, and thanks for the people that sub on Twitch in particular. Thanks for the subbers, they know who they are. Do the usual following, social media, blah de blah de blah, and we shall see you on the next stream. So bye for now, everyone.